What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Kickin' Bass TV. Today's video, I'm gonna show you 10 ways to rig a SENKO, otherwise known as a stick bait, one of the most versatile, most popular soft plastics in the world of bass fishing. So do me a favor, hit that subscribe button down below. Let's go. All right, let's get right into it with number one, which is the Texas rig, a very popular, effective way to fish a SENKO, a method I use almost daily. All you need is an EWG hook or extra wide gap hook. Run the hook through the head of the worm, about 1/8 of an inch, just like so. Slowly pull the hook through until you reach the shank, at which point you're gonna twist it 180 degrees while slowly pulling down at the same time. What that's gonna do is kind of tuck the eye of the hook into the head of the worm, rest the bait securely on the shank where it's not going to slip. From there, you're gonna go ahead, line up your bait so that it lies flat as possible. Run the hook through. I like to leave mine text exposed for better hookups. A lot of people like to skin hook theirs to make it truly weedless. After that, you add your choice of bullet weight or worm weight. I like to throw between 1/8 and 1/4 ounce on mine, and I like to peg mine, whereas a lot of people don't. It's up to you, but for me, keeps it truly Texas rig. It doesn't float around, more like a Carolina rig. Then you've got the weightless Texas rig, which is exactly what it sounds like, just a Texas rig without the weight. And I'm gonna throw this twice a year. First, in the summertime, when bass are suspended offshore, it's hot and they're not giving chase to many moving baits. This is a great finesse technique, much like the Wacky Rig, that lets the bait fall slow through the water column and leads to a lot more fish being caught when it's hot outside. On the opposite side of the spectrum, when bass are lethargic, shut down in the cold water in the winter, this is a great way to bottom crawl, thrown weightless and weedless. You can allow the current to just kind of move it slowly and catch a lot more fish during that tough time of year. Next up, we've got the Wacky Rig, another great finesse technique, especially in the summer or winter. Whenever the bite gets tough, this is one of my go-to methods. I like to rig mine old school by running the hook right through the center of the worm, but you can also get custom Wacky Rig O-rings. Either way, the point is to have it balanced right at the center of the worm so that as it falls slow through the water column, just a subtle twitch of your rod will send a shock wave through the bait, creating a killer action, and it's a very effective way to catch bass. After that, we've got the Ned Rig. Now, this is something that most anglers either love or hate. I personally throw these quite a bit, especially when fishing for smallmouth and grubs, but with the stick bait, it's a great tool for catching bedding bass during the spawn or fishing offshore ledges, deep water access points, because you've got the weight, much like a shaky head, that's gonna allow that floating worm to stand on end, but with the exposed hook, you'll have a much higher hookup ratio. But you definitely wanna throw these places you're familiar, as they will get hung up more around heavier cover. Another thing Ned rigs are great for is throwing a smaller presentation. Now, I can cut this worm down to a Ned stick style bait or use one of the various Ned style baits on the market, but when the bite gets tough, this is oftentimes exactly what the situation calls for. By downsizing my bait, that smaller profile is gonna get bit more often. I'm gonna throw this brush guard weedless version so that I'm not getting hung up nearly as much, and as you can see, it's going to stand up on end the majority of the time, giving it great action underwater. After that, we've got the Shaky Head, and this is probably my favorite way to fish worms regardless of the style of worm, because you simply put that plastic into the screw lock bait keeper on the weighted end of the hook. It's gonna save you a lot of money and time in the long run by making those soft plastics last a lot longer, but you also make bottom contact while allowing those floating plastics to still move freely in the current, and you get the weedless presence from the Texas rig setup. You can either text expose yours like this here, or if you're fishing area where you might get hung up easier, you can skin hook it to make it truly weedless. Next up is the Nico Rig, another popular finesse technique, similar to the Wacky Rig in that you're gonna be rigging it through the center of the worm. The difference with the Nico Rig, you're creating an off-balance effect by adding a weight to one end of it, simply known as a Nico nail in most bait shops. In our case, just using a small screw from the junk drawer at home. And I found that these small screws are a little bit less of a headache because they don't tend to fall out like the Nicos do, and they stay in place more securely. As I mentioned, very similar to the Wacky Rig, but with completely different action in the water, as that weight is going to make it easier to control, as well as easier to make bottom contact with. After that, we've got the drop shot, something that I personally don't fish a lot, but I have a few friends who swear by it. You start by putting a weight at the bottom of your line, followed by a hook a foot or two above that. And the purpose of this is so that you can make bottom contact with the weight and keep your plastic floating freely above it. This is something you usually throw a robo worm or a small finesse swim bait on, but today the purpose is to show the versatility of the stick bait, and you can absolutely use these to fish a drop shot. Next up is the Carolina rig, another one that I rarely fish unless it's a dead of winter or I'm bottom fishing for trout or walleye. It's a bottom fishing rig, essentially a Texas rig soft plastic on a leader line, separated by a barrel swivel, followed by a series of beads and weights that are not only intended to make bottom contact and leave your bait floating freely behind it, but also to make added noise and increase reaction strike. Another great way to use a SENKO is as a trailer bait, although more unconventional than a craw or a twin tail grub that you would typically throw on this style of jig. I have seen a stick bait successfully used in this presentation to catch bass before, and I gotta admit, I don't exactly hate the way that this pairing looks. It should catch us some fish. Another example would be to throw it on the back of a spinner bait or even a swim jig in place of a standard swim bait trailer. And if you're like me and you're targeting post-spawn bass right now in shallow water along grass lines, reeds, and toolies, this is one of the first things you're throwing every morning. And honestly, in terms of profile, it's not going to change all that much compared to the standard swim bait trailer, as it's just going to ultimately look like a swim bait that's missing its tail. And considering we're fishing this bait on the move 99% of the time, it really shouldn't affect the action all that much. Last but not least, you can add a blade to your stick bait, which is definitely pretty unconventional, but has been proven to work in the past, especially during the fall feed up, where a little bit of flash goes a long way in helping your bait stick out amongst those groups of bait fish. And today we borrowed a willow blade from an owner, Flashy Swimmer, to make this modification, but you can also get these sold separately at your local shop. And that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Hopefully this will help you learn a couple new methods of rigging a SENKO and help you catch some more fish this year. If you enjoyed the video, do me a favor, hit that like button for me down below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell to stay up to date with our new videos and giveaways. And if you have another way of rigging a stick bait that we didn't list in today's video, let me know in the comment section down below. Until next time, I'm D with Kickin' Bass TV.
Subscribe!